The year was 2847 when humanity received its first invitation to join the Galactic Council. For centuries, humans had looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Now they had their answer. They were not alone, and the galaxy was full of ancient civilizations that had been watching them for a very long time. Ambassador Catherine Cole was chosen to lead the first human delegation to Nexus Prime, the great capital world where the council held its meetings. She was a woman of 53 years, with gray streaks in her dark hair and calm eyes that had seen many difficult negotiations. She had spent her whole life preparing for moments like this, but nothing could have truly prepared her for what she found. The council chamber was enormous. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls were made of crystal that sang with soft music when the light touched them. Everything about the place was designed to make visitors feel small, and it worked very well on the human delegation. 17 species held seats on the council. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Catherine's mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. There were beings made of living light, creatures with dozens of eyes, and entities that seemed to exist in more dimensions than humans could perceive. The Valorians were the most powerful of all. They appeared as shifting patterns of geometric shapes and colored light, beautiful and cold and very, very old. Their leader, Executor Thal, spoke first. "The humans have achieved basic interstellar travel," he announced to the assembly. His voice came through Catherine's translator implant as flat and uninterested. "They have met the minimum requirements for observer status. We will allow them to watch our proceedings." Catherine noticed how he said minimum. She noticed how he said allow. She filed these things away in her memory and kept her face perfectly calm. Lieutenant Commander Derek Hayes stood beside her. He was her security officer, a solid man in his early 40s who had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years. His hand kept moving toward his weapon out of old habit, though he knew he would never need it here. "They don't seem very happy to see us," he whispered. "No," Catherine agreed. "They do not." Over the following weeks, the human delegation learned how the galaxy really worked. The council was not a gathering of equals. It was a hierarchy, with the oldest species at the top and everyone else arranged below them according to how useful they were. The founding species, those who had discovered faster than light travel thousands of years ago, held all the real power. They could veto any decision. They controlled the most important trade routes. They decided which technologies could be shared and which must remain secret. Younger species were tolerated, sometimes respected, occasionally feared. But they were never truly equal. And humans? Humans were at the very bottom. The Veshan Collective was a species of tall, elegant beings with silver skin and 3 eyes. They had cured diseases that still killed millions of humans every year. When Catherine asked if they would share their medical knowledge, the Veshan ambassador looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Your species has not yet demonstrated the maturity required for such advanced medicine," he said. "Perhaps in a few centuries, you will be ready." The Corridon Empire controlled the richest mining territories in the galaxy. They were massive creatures, twice the height of humans, with skin like stone and voices like grinding rocks. When human traders asked for access to their shipping lanes, the Corridon representative laughed. "These routes have belonged to us for 10,000 years, he said. "You cannot simply arrive and demand a share. Know your place, little ones." The Valorians were the worst of all. They did not insult humans directly. They simply acted as if humans were not worth noticing. In council meetings, they would speak over human delegates as if they were not there. They would make decisions affecting human colonies without consulting anyone from Earth. They treated humanity the way a busy adult might treat a child who keeps asking annoying questions. Catherine endured it all. She was a professional. She understood that new members of any organization had to prove themselves. She believed that if humanity was patient, if they worked hard, if they showed their value, eventually they would earn respect. She sent her reports back to Earth every week. She described the challenges. She explained the hierarchy. She recommended patience and persistence. But in her private journal, she wrote different things. They do not see us as future equals, she wrote one night after a particularly difficult day. They do not see us as beings who might someday earn their respect. They see us as a nuisance, a distraction, something to be tolerated until we go away or die out. I wonder if they understand what they are teaching us. Every time they dismiss us, every time they refuse to hear us, every time they treat our lives as less valuable than theirs, they are teaching us something about ourselves and something about them. We are learning that kindness given to us is rare. We are learning that respect must be earned from beings who do not wish to give it. We are learning that the galaxy is not the welcoming place we hoped it would be. But we are also learning something else. We are learning who we are. And I think, in time, they will learn who we are too. Catherine served as ambassador for 25 years. She never raised her voice in anger. She never responded to insults with insults. She simply did her job, day after day, with quiet dignity and endless patience. Other humans came and went. Scientists who were denied research opportunities. Traders who were blocked from markets. Doctors who were refused the medicine that could save human lives. Artists whose work was dismissed as primitive. Philosophers whose ideas were ignored thought they all learned the same. Lessons Catherine had learned. The galaxy was not interested in what humanity had to offer. The galaxy did not care about human dreams or human potential. The galaxy had decided, long before humans ever left their planet, that some species mattered and some did not, and humans did not matter. But the strange thing was this. Even as they learned these painful lessons, humans did not become bitter. They did not become cruel. They did not give up their belief that kindness was better than cruelty, that helping was better than ignoring, that every life had value regardless of what species it belonged to. If anything, the rejection made them hold tighter to these beliefs, because if the galaxy would not show them kindness, then humans would show kindness to the galaxy. Not because they expected anything in return, not because they hoped to change anyone's mind, but simply because that was who they were, and that choice, made quietly in the hearts of millions of humans across dozens of colony worlds, would eventually change everything. Though no one knew it yet, not even the humans themselves. 50 years passed, and humanity did something that no one expected. They did not complain. They did not protest. They did not demand better treatment or threaten to leave the council. They simply went to work. When the Veshan homeworld was struck by a terrible plague, the council sent scientists to study the disease. They wrote reports. They held meetings. They discussed possible solutions. But it was humans who actually helped. Dr. Samuel Grant was a quiet man of 45 years who had spent his entire career studying alien diseases. When he heard about the Veshan plague, he did not wait for permission. He gathered 200 human doctors and nurses and flew to the Veshan homeworld on the first available ship. The Veshans did not welcome them warmly. They allowed the humans to work in the poorest districts, the places where their own doctors did not want to go. They gave them broken equipment and limited supplies. They watched with doubt in their 3 eyes. Samuel did not care. He worked 18 hours a day, every day, for 3 years. His team developed a treatment that saved millions of Veshan lives. 11 human doctors died from exposure to the plague. They were buried on the Veshan homeworld, far from Earth, far from their families. When the plague was finally defeated, The Dacian government issued a brief statement acknowledging that outside assistance had proven useful. They did not mention the human doctors by name. They did not thank Samuel Grant. They did not speak of the 11 humans who gave their lives. Samuel returned to Earth without complaint. When reporters asked him how he felt about the Dacians' response, he simply shrugged. "We didn't go there for thanks," he said. "We went there because people were dying and we could help. That's enough." On the other side of the galaxy, the Khoridan Empire faced a different crisis. Their mining colonies were built on planets with unstable ground, and earthquakes had begun destroying entire cities. Khoridan engineers could not predict when the quakes would strike. Professor Maria Santos was a geologist who had spent 30 years studying how planets moved and shook. When she learned of the Khoridan problem, she offered her help. The Khoridans did not want human help. They considered humans too primitive to understand their advanced mining operations. But their people were dying, so they grudgingly allowed Maria and her small team to study the situation. Maria worked for 5 years. She developed an early warning system that could predict earthquakes days in advance. Her system saved an estimated 4 million Khoridan lives. The Khoridan Empire took her technology and made it their own. They removed all mention of human involvement from their records. They taught their children that Khoridan scientists had solved the earthquake problem through their own genius. Maria found out about this years later. She was asked if she wanted to file a formal complaint with the council. She declined. "The system works," she said. "People are alive who would have been dead. What else matters?" These stories repeated themselves across the galaxy. Wherever there was suffering, humans appeared to help. Wherever there was need, humans gave what they had. They built hospitals on worlds that had denied them trade rights. They taught farming techniques to colonies that had laughed at human food. They repaired ships belonging to species that had insulted them, and they never asked for anything in return. The younger council species began to notice. The Tellarite Federation had joined the council only 1,000 years earlier, and they remembered what it felt like to be dismissed by the older powers. Ambassador Ven was an old Tellarite with deep wrinkles around her large eyes. She had watched the humans carefully for decades, and she did not understand what she was seeing. "They never demand recognition," she told her colleagues one evening. "They help, and then they leave. They save lives, and then they go home. They give their knowledge away as if it cost them nothing." "Perhaps they are too simple to understand politics," suggested a Khoridan diplomat. "Perhaps they do not realize they could use their help as a bargaining chip." "Perhaps," Ven said slowly. "Or perhaps they understand something that we do not." She did not say what she meant by this. She was not sure herself. Back on Earth and in the human colonies, a new generation was growing up. They heard stories from their parents and grandparents about doctors who healed ungrateful patients, soldiers who died protecting ships that would not remember them, scientists who gave away discoveries that others would claim as their own. These children learned 2 lessons from these stories. The first lesson was about kindness. Humans helped because helping was right. They gave because giving was who they were. They did not require thanks or recognition or payment. Kindness was its own reward. The second lesson was quieter. It was not taught in words, but in silences. It was in the way their parents' eyes grew distant when they spoke of the council. It was in the careful way they avoided saying certain things. The children learned that the galaxy did not value human lives. They learned that no amount of helping would ever be enough. They learned that some doors would always be closed, no matter how hard they knocked. A young girl named Patricia Morgan was 7 years old when she asked her grandmother a question that had been bothering her for a long time. "Grandma, why do we keep helping people who are mean to us?" Her grandmother had been a scientist once. She had spent 20 years trying to share her research with Dacian universities, and they had rejected her every time. Now she was old and tired, but her eyes were still sharp. "Because kindness is not a trade," she said after thinking for a moment. "We do not give in order to receive. We give because giving is who we are. But what if they never say thank you? Then we learn something important about them. And maybe, one day, they will learn something important about themselves." Patricia did not understand these words at the time. She was too young, but she remembered them. She carried them with her as she grew up, as she joined the Space Navy, as she rose through the ranks to become one of the most respected officers in the human fleet. And decades later, when the time came for humanity to make an impossible choice, Patricia would finally understand what her grandmother meant. The galaxy was teaching humanity that their sacrifices did not matter, that their kindness would never be repaid, that their hopes for acceptance would never be fulfilled. But humanity was learning a different lesson. They were learning that they did not need the galaxy's approval to know who they were. They were learning that their worth did not depend on whether others recognized it. They were learning, slowly and painfully, that the only respect that truly mattered was the respect they had for themselves. And that lesson would change everything. Though no one knew it yet. The Nexus incident began with a simple distress signal. An asteroid mining station in a distant star system had suffered a terrible accident. The main reactor was failing, and if it was not repaired soon, the whole station would explode. 12,000 workers lived on that station, beings from 6 different species who had come to mine precious metals from the asteroids. 847 of those workers were humans. They worked the deepest and most dangerous levels of the station because other species refused to take those jobs. The pay was poor and the conditions were harsh, but humans needed work. And the mining companies knew that humans would do what others would not. The nearest ship to the station was a human rescue vessel called the Compassion. Its captain was a woman named Linda Shaw, a veteran of 30 years in search and rescue operations. She was 51 years old, with short gray hair and steady hands that had pulled thousands of people from burning ships and collapsing buildings. Captain Shaw had never lost a ship. She had never abandoned anyone in need. She did not intend to start now. The Compassion reached the station 4 hours before any council ship could arrive. The situation was worse than the distress signal had indicated. The reactor was in complete failure. Manure. They had perhaps 6 hours before it exploded and killed everyone aboard. Captain Shaw did not waste time asking for permission. She ordered her crew to begin evacuation immediately. Her shuttles flew back and forth between the Compassion and the station, carrying frightened workers to safety. Her engineers worked to stabilize the reactor and buy more time. Her medical teams treated the injured. By the time the council fleet arrived, Captain Shaw had already saved 9,847 lives. The Valorian battlecruiser Eternalite was the largest and most powerful ship in the fleet. Its commander, Admiral Keth, was an ancient Valorian who had fought in wars that ended before humanity discovered fire. He did not like what he found when he arrived. "The situation is now under council control," he announced over all channels. "All non-council vessels will cease operations immediately." Captain Shaw contacted the Valorian flagship directly. "Admiral, there are still over 2,000 people on that station. The reactor is failing. We have perhaps 90 minutes before it explodes." "The situation is being evaluated," Admiral Keth replied. His voice through the translator was cold and unconcerned. "Your assistance is no longer required. Stand down and withdraw." Captain Shaw looked at her crew. She looked at the station on her view screen, where thousands of people were still waiting to be saved. She looked at the Valorian fleet, which was holding position and doing nothing. She made her decision. "Negative, Admiral," she said calmly. "We still have people to save." She ordered her shuttles back to the station. For 73 minutes, while the Valorian fleet watched without helping, Captain Shaw and her crew pulled survivors from the dying station. They saved another 1,892 lives. Then the reactor finally exploded. When the light faded and the debris cleared, 106 people were still on the station. 83 of them were human workers who had refused to evacuate until everyone else was safe. They had stayed behind to help others escape, knowing that they might not escape themselves. They did not escape. Captain Shaw brought her ship home. She filed her report exactly as she always did, stating the facts without emotion or accusation. She described what had happened. She listed the names of the dead. She did not say that the council could have helped and chose not to. The council's response came 3 weeks later. Captain Shaw and her crew were formally punished for disobeying the orders of a Valorian admiral. The human government was fined a large sum of money for conducting an unauthorized rescue operation. The official report noted that the human captain had shown dangerous disregard for proper chain of command. The 11,739 lives saved were not mentioned. 83 humans who died were listed in a footnote. At the end of the document, their species was noted. Nothing else. Ambassador Catherine Cole was now 78 years old. Her hair was completely white, and she walked with a cane, but her mind was still sharp, and her dignity was unbroken. She had served humanity for 50 years, enduring insults and dismissals with patience and grace. She stood before the council to receive the punishment on behalf of her government. She listened to the charges. She accepted the fine. She did everything protocol required. Then, for the first time in her long career, she asked a question. "May I know," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "how many of the species represented in this chamber were saved by Captain Shaw and her crew?" The question hung in the air like smoke. No one moved. No one spoke. Executor Thol's patterns shifted through colors that the translator could not interpret. For a moment, something almost like discomfort passed through his geometric form. "That is not relevant to the current proceedings," he said finally. "I understand," Catherine replied. "I simply wish to ask." She returned to her seat. The session ended. The fine was paid. Everything continued as it always had. 1 month later, Catherine Cole retired from diplomatic service. She returned to Earth, to a small house by the ocean where she could watch the waves and remember all the things she had seen and done. Her replacement was a young man named Christopher Adams. He arrived on Nexus Prime with new instructions from the government of Earth. The instructions were simple. Continue all humanitarian operations. Continue all scientific cooperation. Continue all rescue missions. Continue helping wherever help was needed, but effective immediately. Humanity would no longer seek membership in the Galactic Council. No explanation was given. No demands were made. No angry speeches were delivered. No ultimatums were issued. Humanity simply stopped asking to be accepted. They stopped applying for full membership. They stopped requesting better trade agreements. They stopped petitioning for representation. They stopped trying to prove that they deserved respect. They just stopped. And in that stopping, in that quiet withdrawal of hope, something fundamental changed. Not in the galaxy, which continued as it always had, but in humanity itself. They had learned, at last, that they could not earn the respect of beings who did not wish to give it. They had learned that no amount of sacrifice would ever be enough for those who did not value them, and so they stopped trying. Not stopped helping. Never that. But stopped hoping. And the galaxy did not notice. Not yet, but it would. The first 10 years passed without anyone noticing anything different. Humans still answered distress calls. Human doctors still treated patients on alien worlds. Human scientists still published research that anyone could read. Human teachers still taught, and human builders still built. And human rescue ships still flew into danger to save lives. But something had changed. Something quiet. Something that took a long time to see. Human delegations stopped attending council ceremonies. Human representatives stopped asking for time to speak at meetings. Human petitions stopped appearing in the council's long list of requests. When council officials wanted to discuss matters with humanity, they found themselves talking to low-level workers who were polite and helpful, but who could not make any real decisions. We would be happy to forward your request to the appropriate department, they would say with pleasant smiles. And then the request would disappear into paperwork and never be seen again. The Leshens noticed first. They had been trying to start negotiations for a new program to exchange medical knowledge. Human doctors had developed remarkable treatments for brain injuries, and the Leshens wanted access to this research. They are not refusing us, the Leshen ambassador reported with clear confusion. They simply never respond. Our messages are received and acknowledged, but never answered. Our diplomats are welcomed politely, but never given anyone important to talk to. Perhaps they have not yet replaced their retired officials, suggested a Corridon advisor. But the years passed, and no new officials appeared. The human embassy on Nexus Prime grew smaller and smaller. 300 staff became 50, then 20, then finally just one. Her name was Hannah Moore. She was a pleasant woman in her 30s who kept the embassy clean, forwarded messages to Earth, and politely declined every invitation to every formal event. "I'm sorry," she would say with a genuine smile. "I'm not authorized to attend on behalf of my government, but I'll certainly pass along your invitation." She passed along hundreds of invitations over the years. No one ever came. In the second decade, the consequences became more serious. A Corridon colony ship lost its way in unexplored space. 23,000 colonists drifted helplessly, their navigation systems destroyed, their supplies running low. They sent a distress call, hoping someone would hear. A human patrol ship answered. They found the colony ship, guided it to safety, and delivered all 23,000 Corridons to their destination without losing a single life. The Corridon government was embarrassed. They had spent centuries telling their people that humans were primitive and useless. Now they owed their colonists' lives to these same humans. For the first time in 180 years, the Corridon Empire issued a formal statement of gratitude to humanity. Humanity did not respond. The statement was acknowledged. A brief note thanked the Corridon government for their message. That was all. No diplomatic meeting was requested. No trade negotiations were proposed. No advantage was sought. The Corridon ambassador asked for a meeting with Earth's leaders to discuss improved relations between their peoples. His request was forwarded to the appropriate department. No meeting was ever scheduled. What did they want? The Corridon Emperor demanded of his advisors. What are they trying to achieve? What is their goal? No one could answer him. No one understood. In the third decade, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Humanity had built 73 hospitals on alien worlds over the years. These hospitals still operated, staffed by human volunteers, treating patients of every species for free. But no new hospitals were being built. The existing ones were maintained, and nothing more. Humanity had shared more than 400 farming techniques with hungry worlds. They still honored those old agreements. But no new research was being shared. Human scientists still published their discoveries, but only in human languages, in human journals, on human networks. Humanity still saved lives across the galaxy. They still answered every distress call. But their patrol routes had slowly shifted. They focused more on human space now. They only responded to alien emergencies when no one else could help. They are not abandoning anyone, observed Ambassador Ven, now very old, but still serving her people. They still help. They still heal. They still save. But something is different. What has changed? Asked a young Valorian diplomat who had been assigned to study the human situation. Ven was silent for a long moment. She had watched humanity for over 50 years. She had seen their endless patience, their quiet dignity, their stubborn hope that someday things would be different. They used to hope, she said finally. They used to believe that if they helped enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, we would eventually see them as equals. They used to want to belong. They used to knock on our door and wait for us to open it. And now? Now they have stopped knocking. They have stopped waiting. They have stopped hoping that we will ever open the door. The young diplomat did not understand why this was important. But they still help us, he said. They still do all the same things they always did. Yes, Ven agreed. But there is a difference between helping because you hope to be accepted and helping because it is simply who you are. There is a difference between giving with hope and giving without it. What difference does it make? The help is the same. Ven looked at him with tired eyes that had seen too much. The difference, she said slowly, is that hope can be fulfilled. When someone helps you because they hope for something in return, you can give them what they hope for, and the relationship changes. You become connected. You become responsible to each other. But when someone helps you without hope, without wanting anything, without needing anything from you, then you cannot reach them. You cannot change the relationship. You cannot make them need you, because they have learned to need nothing. They've become free of us. And we did not even notice it happening. The young diplomat still did not fully understand. But he remembered her words later, when everything fell apart. And then he understood them very well. Across the galaxy, humanity continued its quiet work. They healed the sick. They fed the hungry. They rescued the lost. They gave their knowledge and their labor and sometimes their lives to help beings who would not thank them, but they no longer hoped for thanks. They no longer dreamed of acceptance. They no longer imagined a future where they would sit as equals in the great council chamber. They had found a different kind of peace. A peace that came from knowing who they were, regardless of whether anyone else recognized it. And in finding that peace, they had become something the galaxy had never seen before. They had become a species that helped without conditions, that gave without expectations, that served without seeking reward. They had become truly free, and the galaxy, which had taught them this lesson without meaning to, was about to learn what that freedom meant. The war began in the 47th year of human silence. The Dominion of the Outer Reaches had always hated the Council. For thousands of years, they had been forced to obey rules they did not make, pay taxes they did not agree to, and accept their place at the bottom of the galactic order. They had been planning their revenge for a very long time. When they finally struck, they struck hard. 17 major star systems were attacked on the same day. The Dominion fleet was 3 times larger than anyone had expected. Their weapons were more powerful than anything the Council had seen before. They had spent centuries preparing in secret, and now they were ready. In 6 months, 4 Council worlds fell. The Deshan Second Fleet, once the pride of their civilization, was completely destroyed. Millions of beings died. Millions more fled their homes. The Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in living memory, they voted to ask for military help from a species that was not a full member. They sent their request to humanity. Admiral Patricia Morgan received the message in her quarters aboard the flagship Resolute. She was 62 years old now, with white hair cut short and eyes that had seen both the best and worst that the galaxy had to offer. She had spent her whole life in service to humanity, rising from a young officer to commander of the entire human defense fleet. She read the Council's request twice. Then she forwarded it to Earth without adding any comment of her own. 3 days later, she received her answer. She called her senior officers to the command deck. Captain Nathan Boyd, her tactical advisor. Commander Sarah Price, head of fleet operations. Admiral Harrison Cole, her old friend and mentor, whose mother Catherine had served as humanity's first ambassador so many years ago. Earth is considered the Council's request, Admiral Morgan said. We have been authorized to respond. The officers waited in silence. We will provide humanitarian support to all civilian populations affected by the war. Medical ships will treat the wounded. Transport vessels will evacuate refugees. Supply ships will bring food and medicine to those in need. This assistance will be given freely, without conditions, to anyone who needs it. And military support? Captain Boyd asked quietly. Admiral Morgan was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke words that would be remembered for generations. Earth wishes me to explain something to the Council. 47 years ago, we stopped asking for membership. We stopped seeking their approval. We stopped hoping they would accept us as equals. But we never stopped helping. We never stopped caring. We never stopped believing that every life has value. She looked at her officers. These men and women who had inherited the legacy of generations of humans who had served without thanks. We will continue to help. We will save every life we can save. We will heal every wound we can heal. This is who we are. This has always been who we are. But we will not fight their war. We will not send our children to die defending their power. We will not sacrifice human lives to preserve a system that never valued us. That is Earth's answer. The message reached the Council on the worst night of their war. The Dominion fleet had broken through their defensive lines. Enemy ships were advancing toward Nexus Prime itself. Everything they had built over 12,000 years was about to fall. Executor Thal read humanity's response alone in the empty Council chamber. His patterns shifted through colors that had no names in any language. For the first time in his ancient life, he felt something that might have been called despair. They will help our refugees, he said aloud to the darkness. They will heal our wounded. They will carry our survivors to safety. He paused, and his light grew dim. But they will not save us. They will not fight for us. They will not die for us. He thought of all the humans who had already died for the Council over the centuries. The doctors who caught alien diseases. The soldiers who fell defending ungrateful merchants. The rescue workers who flew into exploding reactors to save people who would not remember their names. He thought of Captain Linda Shaw, who saved nearly 12,000 lives and was punished for it. He thought of Catherine Cole, asking her one simple question that no one had ever answered. He thought of all the times humans had knocked on the door, hoping to be let in, and all the times the door had remained closed. We taught them that their sacrifices meant nothing, he said to the empty room. We taught them that their help would never be enough. We taught them that no matter how much they gave, they would never be our equals. His light faded to the color of dying stars. And now they have learned the lesson we taught them. And we will learn what it means to live without their hope. The war lasted 4 more years. The Council survived, but barely. They fought their own battles now. They died their own deaths. They learned at terrible cost to save themselves. Through it all, human medical ships moved through the war zones, treating the wounded of all species. Human refugee transports carried the displaced to safety. Human aid workers fed the hungry and sheltered the homeless. But human warships did not fight. Human soldiers did not die. Humanity watched and helped and did not save them. When the war finally ended, the Council was a shadow of what it had been. The old hierarchy was broken. The ancient powers were weakened. New voices demanded to be heard. Ambassador Ven, in her final years of life, made one last journey to the human embassy on Nexus Prime. Hannah Moore was still there, still tending the small building, still forwarding messages that were never answered. "I came to ask," Ven said, "if there was ever a moment when things could have been different. If there was ever a choice we could have made that would have changed how this ended." Hannah thought about this for a long time. "You could have said thank you," she said finally. "When our doctors saved your people and asked for nothing. When our soldiers died protecting your ships and asked for nothing. When our scientists gave you their life's work and asked for nothing. You could have looked at us and seen people, not primitives. You could have opened the door when we knocked. We never wanted power. We never wanted wealth. We only wanted to be seen, to be valued, to belong." Ven felt something in her chest that might have been grief. And now? Hannah smiled, and there was no anger in it, no bitterness, only a quiet peace that Ven found more painful than rage would have been. "Now we have learned to live without your approval. We know who we are. We know what we believe. We know that helping others is right, whether they thank us or not. You taught us that we would never be enough for you. And in teaching us that, you set us free." Ven returned to the council one last time. She wrote her final report, knowing that few would read it, knowing that fewer would understand. "They have not abandoned us," she wrote. "They still help us, still heal us, still save us when we fall. But they no longer need us to tell them they are worthy. They no longer wait for us to open the door. We thought their silence was punishment. We thought they were trying to hurt us by withdrawing. We were wrong. Their silence was simply the sound of hope dying. And in that silence, they found something we never gave them. They found themselves. We looked at the stars and saw our empire. They looked at the stars and saw people in need. We called them lesser. They called themselves human. And now, at last, we understand the difference. We understand what we lost. We understand that some doors, once closed, can never be opened again." The report was filed. The years passed. The galaxy slowly healed. And humanity walked on. In silence, helping those who needed help. Asking nothing in return. They had learned to hope for nothing from the galaxy. And learning that they had become something the galaxy could never be. They had become enough for themselves. And that, in the end, was the only thing that ever truly mattered.